Okay, looks like we are recording. And guys, I am so excited to have on the program Ingrid Newkirk. This is I've been saying this a lot on my podcast lately, Ingrid, because I've been starting to have some of the people who are just giants in the animal rights movement on my podcast. But this is the honor of a lifetime. It is so great to meet you. Thank you for being here.
Oh, that's awfully kind of you. Thank you very much.
Well, and it's timely as well because very recently, and on August 1st, PETA announced that they would be appointing a new president, Tracy Reiman. So the first time in, I guess, your 45-year history. So I know that your work's going to continue, Ingrid. I know you're so passionate, but I do want to just start with a congratulations on such an incredible career. It's just monumental and wow, well done. My hat's off to you.
Thank you. If I could keep going for another 45 years, but biology seems to be against me at 76 and a half. But I work as vigorously today as I ever have because this is my life's work. This is something that's so important to me. And I've worked alongside Tracy, our new president, for 22 of those years. And I keep teasing her that in a minute she's going to have to find somebody and not wait as long as I have.
It must be just an incredibly tough job. I just want to say, even like sort of before we get into it, that my experience with PETA over the years has been that everybody I've worked with at PETA, and a special shout out to Alka Channa, who's been so helpful to us. But anytime I've reached out to anybody at PETA, they have been so prompt and responsive and professional. And I just want to extend that to you because a quick thank you to Wayne Shung, who made this introduction to us. Wayne told me like a couple of years back, anytime he emails Ingrid Newkirk, she gets back to us within a few minutes. And that actually played out. I think he emailed you one time and it happened within like 2 minutes. He had a response from you. So I have a big thank you about that as well.
No, my pleasure. I mean, we have an absolute rule that you get back to people. And I hear very sadly from people all the time. I had a situation with an animal and I tried to reach this group and I tried to reach that group. And I'm sure everyone's slammed. But I say to our people, and always have, you have to get right back, even if it's to refer them to someone or to give them advice. But don't let them hang.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's what PETA has done. So apparently, from the top down, you've set a great tone and it's set a great example for everybody. And PETA has done that, whether it's been free materials that we need for protests or research in the case of Alka, or as you mentioned, referrals to people that we may need to talk to. It's really an impressive operation. And tell me just a little bit about what the day to day is, because I'm sure it's just, you've been described before in previous interviews as someone who gets back to people, whether or not it's like late at night for you. So it seems to be like from sun up to sundown, you're living and breathing animal rights. It must have taken quite a toll.
Well, it's winter, so it's before sunup and it's
Right.
after sundown right now. I can't stand winter, but here we are. No, we have so many entities, Jeremy, because I have to, when I get up in the morning, and I'm an early riser, India is already talking to me, PETA India. And then PETA Australia has already been on, and then comes PETA Germany, and then PETA UK, and then it's the East Coast, and then by the evening, it's a lot of the West Coast. So it's very busy. I don't know how we managed with a telephone instead of email, because I get a good 1,000 emails a day, but the phone never rings anymore very much. But it's every single thing is interesting. There are innumerable things you can do to stop something that's bad from happening. And after all these years, I should know a lot of resources, a lot of places to direct people to, advice to give. So I'm very lucky in that regard too. But yeah, it's busy, and busy is good. I mean, this isn't your practice life, as someone in our on our staff said. This is your life. Make the most of it.
hmm so it was also announced that you would stay on as principal. What is the principal? And so what is your day to day going to look like from here on out?
Pretty much the same, except Tracy has talents that I don't have. She's very good with IT and AI, things like that. She raised a child, I did not, and so she's found herself in education for children. And so that is one of her fortes that is grand. It's a wonderful thing to have. And she was one of the first people, in fact, I think she was the first person to bring a charge of cruelty to animals against a factory farmer for chickens. And so, chickens and sheep, she's very big on the wool business, getting people to understand it's not just a haircut, they cut them to shreds. And I've seen it myself in Australia. So she's got all sorts of talents, and she's more in tune, being much younger than me, with other generations that I struggle to understand sometimes.
Um, I read this biography of you by John Hochstartner, and he had mentioned, and this was like maybe 6 years ago, he had mentioned in that book that it was speculated that Tracy was in line to succeed you. So I guess this wasn't like anything new. It sounds to me like this had been planned for a long time. And I guess it's a good chance to ask you, why Tracy? Why is Tracy the right person for that?
I have always said, for a long, long time, as I've watched people in the organization, Tracy has been my right hand man. Um, she's a girl, but she's my right hand man,
Right.
and she knows us inside and out. In the very earliest of times of her joining us, she worked in the mail room, and then she worked in campaigns. She was out on the street, so she's done almost everything here. So she brings a wealth of history of PETA with her. And I really trust her judgment, because I've been in meetings with her for years where I've seen that she finds the flaws in a plan, or she corrects somebody who might have a misimpression. And she's animal rights through and through, which is exactly what we need. We cannot veer off the track we're on. We're solidly abolitionists.
Absolutely. Yeah, and why was it but because I saw your expression when I mentioned John. He wrote that biography about Ronnie Lee, and Ronnie had mentioned to me that he seemed to have written that without your input or permission. So, what's the story behind that? I mean, you don't have to get into it if you don't want to.
No, it's just that I never spoke to him about anything. I thought it was presumptuous. If we want to write a biography or an autobiography, I'll do it myself. Um,
Mm,
but he had his own take, and some things were very wrong, but we
I
didn't
see.
cooperate with it because that's not what we wanted. And so I was thinking, oh, for God's sake, what is this thing? And people will now trust it to be the sort of Bible of PETA. And it's just one man's impression of what he could pick up.
Right. Well, I guess you haven't written an autobiography. You've written a lot of books, but is an autobiography in the works? Are you planning to tell that story from the first
I
person's
don't like
perspective? Sorry.
Yeah, I don't like the cult of the personality kind of thing. That rubs me the wrong way. And so if I write a story about PETA, it'll be about PETA. And I'll obviously be a character in it because I am, but it will really be about all the wonderful people who make this work. The donors, the volunteers, the staff, everybody who pulls together and makes this animal what it is. So it won't be about me.
Well, I hate to ask you a question that I'm sure you've answered 1,000 times, but I just kind of want to take people back to the beginning of PETA and just give them a bit of a backstory of how PETA was formed. By the way, I was born in 1984, so PETA got started, I think, in 1980, 4 years before I was even born, and it's incredible for me to hear about all this work that was taking place before I was even a blip on the map. But if you could just give me a little backstory of how PETA got formed.
Sure, it was 1980, and I had been working as the pound master at the DC Animal Shelter, which was called the DC Pound. But before that, I had worked for the Department of Environmental Protection. I'd been a law enforcement officer out in the field. I had seen all sorts of cruelties on farms, not only factory farms, but family farms too. And that had broken my heart, and I'd become a vegan, or a vegetarian rather, because of that. A volunteer came to our shelter and started to tell me about how milk is produced, and that they take the calf away from the mother, and then the mother is grief stricken and the calf is frightened and so on. And he said to me, "You don't eat veal, do you?" And I said, "No, I never eat veal. I know all about veal." He said, "Well, it's because of the veal industry that we have, the milk industry, that we have the veal industry. So if you're appalled by veal, don't go there." So then I became a vegan. And I thought, there are so many things I've seen in the field. I've inspected laboratories, found terrible things in some of the biggest labs in the Washington, D.C. capital area,
Mhm.
in Navy labs and NIH labs. And I've seen what's happened in hunting and trapping, being in a cruelty officer. And now I've realized that we should be vegans. He gave me a copy of a book that I read, Animal Liberation by Peter Singer. And it said to me, it spoke to me, it said, animals are not here for us to use. They're their own people. They feel pain and fear and everything. And I thought, maybe they shouldn't have longer chains, or we shouldn't be just a little bit kinder to them when we kill them for something or the other. Maybe they really aren't ours. And I thought, if I didn't know this, and I've worked my whole life to be kind to animals, I love them, then there are a lot of people who don't know this either. So I should form a little group, and
Yeah.
we should start handing out pamphlets on the street and talking to people about options to using animals for food, clothing, shampoo, you name it.
Well, it's funny you say I should start a little group, and now here we are. And PETA is one of the largest groups there is for animals, and probably the most famous one for sure. I mean, I know you know this, being with PETA for so long, that when people think about animal activists, PETA is the name that comes up. And I remember one of my earliest times when we were out in farmland, kind of doing some animal activism. Somebody rolled up in a truck and was like, "You guys with PETA?" Like it's just what you get. So what an
It's funny
amazing thing.
though. It,
Yeah, go ahead.
it is funny though, because I was driving down to our headquarters in Norfolk on Saturday, listening to Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me. And
Hmm.
out of the blue, one of the people on the panel said, "Hey, does Peter know about this?" They were talking about something. And they said, "Make sure." And when we do undercover investigations, you would be amazed, maybe not, but how often we have footage of the person that we're filming quietly doing something atrocious, like whipping the bejesus out of a tiger or kicking a sow in the head, who says, "I hope Peter never gets a whiff of this," or "It's good that Peter isn't ever going to see this." And you think, got you on tape saying exactly that.
Yeah, exactly. And you mentioned Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me. My background is with NPR, and it's one of the interesting things, and I can relate to, you mentioned I didn't know about all this stuff that was going on to animals despite being in animal protection. And the same as a journalist at NPR stations, I didn't know about what was going on to animals. And it's funny you mentioned Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me, because I know that some of the few times that I did hear about animal topics, it was made in jest. It was talking about something that PETA said about, maybe we ought to not say things like kill two birds with one stone, or something like that. And it was always kind of like PETA was treated as a gag, like a joke, which is unfortunate. Um, and go ahead.
No, it's okay though, I think, because it's that business of, we've always been taught, is that first they fight you, they laugh at you, then they discuss, and then they accept. So and it's also some ridiculously macho thing, isn't it, to mock anything that seems sympathetic, empathetic, kind, compassionate, sissy. And it's just ludicrous. So I think women have been treated very badly, and historically, children, and nobody listens to them at all unless they're yours. It's other nations and so on. So mockery, I think, is an unfortunate, as you say, part of a progression. And
Mhm.
we'll take it though, because some people listening are going to think, well, actually, they're right. Or, well, they've got a point there. Or, I didn't know about that. I didn't know they were upset about this. So we'll take the mockery gladly.
I was watching an interview you did with Faraz Harsini in a talk to some of his, students or people that he was talking to, and he made the point that your hardworking, like how hardworking you are, is abnormal. It should be the norm, but it's, like it is. And I'm just wondering where this tenacity comes from, and also your love of animals. I've heard you tell this story where you witnessed cruelty to a cow in India. um, but your love for animals is so profound to have started PETA and have this long career. You know this. A lot of people get into the movement and get out, but you've made it your lifetime's work. Um, so that's sort of a two-parter. Where did this love for animals come from, and where is this tenacity that you have come from?
I don't know where my love for animals comes from, other than to say that when I was born, there was a dog in my house. And I didn't have brothers or sisters, there was the dog. And he and I were the best of pals. And we went everywhere together. I always say, my father would put us in the car and we'd both throw up at the same time. We both got car sick, but we
Yeah.
did everything together. And I loved him with all my heart. I think he loved me. And I really didn't see him as being subhuman or lesser than me. We were buddies. We were brother and sister, even. So it may have come in part from that. Tenacity, I don't know. I am so upset by injustice, not just injustice to animals, but particularly injustice to animals, because human beings, by and large, even in the worst of circumstances, often have a way out or a way to understand what's happening to them, or a way to think, well, in the future, I could escape in this way. I mean, they can even take their own lives. Horrible thing to say, but people do when they find something untenable. Um, they can't live through it. But animals are stuck, and I see them chained up. I'm in Norfolk, Virginia, and just across the border in North Carolina, dogs, mostly pits, are on chains for life, alone in the backyard with the winter coming. And it's just, there's nothing they can do. Were they free, they could dig a hole and get in it to keep a little bit warm. They could go and find a drink of water that someone has forgotten to give them for days.
Hmm.
They could even hunt for their food. Human beings usually are wily enough that they can figure out what to do, or not. But my heart burns for other forms of life that have no options and that cannot escape us. I think human slavery was one of the great abominations of all times. And I think there were so many people then who couldn't escape. Now it's dogs and horses and monkeys and mice and so on that
Hmm.
are in trouble. And I think, don't think, some people will say, well, how can you make the comparison? Easily, absolutely. The identity of the victim is absolutely unimportant. It's what's being done to them and what they're suffering that counts, not who they are. So I don't like this idea of, well, I understand them, but I don't understand the others, and you should not include the others. Open your heart,
Hmm.
open your sphere of compassion, let everybody in, and then figure out, that don't be a supremacist or a superior being. You're not a god. Your clan is not more important than any other clan. Every living being is important. Every animal is someone.
Yeah, PETA's been such a lightning rod for criticism, and I've always found it very perplexing in some cases that some of the criticism comes from the movement itself, including on things like comparisons to the Holocaust and slavery. I don't understand that because I feel like we make this comparison all the time. Maybe it just wasn't being done before PETA normalized it. I'm not really sure, but it seems a very apt comparison to me. And on when we talk about in terms of just scale of the number of victims, like there's nothing that even compares to what we're doing to animals. Um, so I don't know, like I know you get this question a lot too, but just how do you deal with that criticism when it's coming from your fellow activists at times?
Oh, human beings will always fight each other over everything.
Yeah,
If there are two cupcakes, there'll be three people who want them. I don't
true.
pay any attention to it other than to try to make sense to them, and they can take it or leave it, which they will. Um, at the moment, I know, especially in a place like New York, that the movement is being torn apart by people who are pro Palestine or say that people who are anti Semitic. And, you know, you can have your opinions about anything, but if you share a commonality on an issue, don't destroy that issue or that activism by bringing in other things you disagree on. I know I was at a conference years ago, and there were two people before I spoke. One person actually said you cannot be pro life and be an animal rights activist. You have to. And the other person said absolutely the opposite. You can't be, the other way. And
Right.
when I got up there, I thought the turtle who's hit by a car in the middle of the road, frankly, doesn't care which side of the abortion issue you're on, just that you stop the car and get him out of the road and help him. And
Hmm.
that's how I feel about all these issues is we can spar and hate each other and fight about all sorts of things. But why not try to always find the common ground? And kindness should bind us. We just had somebody write to a paper and say, "Oh, PETA, you know," and they're talking about conservatives. And everything that they were saying was basically conservatives don't have to be kind. Conservatives love the rodeo. I think people are people. Some do, some don't. And you cannot pigeonhole people as you've got to believe everything in this channel. Kindness should be a universal thing. I mean, God knows anybody,
Hmm.
whatever they believe, if they're in trouble, they hope somebody will come along and be kind to them.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing this play out. It's not really necessary for me to say this, but my listeners know I am no fan of the Trump administration. But there have been, cracks forming, especially along the lines of vivisection, where we're seeing some progress being made. And I know that some people will say, and I will say this too, that some of these um, and my cynical self is saying that some of these are just more that they're against Anthony Fauci or something like that. But there are conservatives out there who are desperately caring about animals, and we're seeing that played out. So, yeah, our movement, I think, does itself a disservice when we try to keep people out of it based on their beliefs on abortion, Palestine, whatever. We definitely see eye to eye on that.
Yeah, I mean, really, it's so important that we have commonality. And I don't know how else to say it other than I think that you can't look at people as one dimensional and you can't imagine that nobody has a grain of hope in them. Maybe if they're a psycho killer, they may.
Mhm.
And it is true, if I can generalize, we do seem to have more conservative support and always have done against the use of animals in experiments, and more Democrat support for veganism or vegetarianism. But this is not 100%. I mean, people are all over the place in what they believe and what their experiences are. You have someone who may be vegan or vegetarian because their father or their husband or some themselves, they had a heart attack. And their
Mhm.
doctor said, "Time to shape up, buddy."
Yeah.
So it may not, but I don't care what the reason is. It opens their minds and their hearts, their eyes to the possibility that this is a good thing. And then
Mhm.
they become more compassionate as they're less defensive. So who cares who they are?
Yeah, exactly. Or where they're from. I had a discussion with a buddy of mine recently about how we sort of bonded early on in our activism because we're in the South. Like we were just like two activists in the South where it's not expected you're going to have as much of a receptive audience. But that's selling these people short. Like the people of the South are just as smart as the people in California, as New York, and all of that. And um, and just as culpable as well. Like, so, like people in California, and, Wayne will tell you this, he's no fan of like the authorities in California for coming down on him, who also happen to be Democrats quite often. So he's had more success in trials in rural Utah, he'll tell you, than he has in liberal California. Although I don't know how liberal that area of California is actually.
And a lot of it comes to experience, doesn't it? Because
Right.
we always have something happens to us and our eyes are open to what we've been doing and we decide, or what we can do, and we decide to change. I mean, you look at culture, is that people grow up. I know in the South there is actually, I think, coon hunters for Jesus. I
Mm.
mean, you probably couldn't find that in New York, but in New York you will also find people who have had an incredibly good education, if you wish to put it that way, and haven't a clue about day to day things. They're not savvy. They may be academic. I mean,
Mhm.
but to take the stereotypes, you have to break them apart because people are people.
Hmm. Hmm. Earlier when you were talking about the example of the turtle on the road, it reminded me of this scene in this documentary that was made about You, I Am an Animal, where you stopped the vehicle because you saw that there was a pigeon or a bird lying in the road, and you wanted to check to see if they're alive, which kind of just kind of showed me that even though you're dealing with the big picture, you're still seeing the individuals, which I feel like is probably one of the things that helps you power through, I think, and keep you motivated, that it's not just becoming numbers to you, millions of birds being killed, or animals, billions, trillions, whatever it is. You're still seeing that individual. Has that been a conscious effort, or is it just easy for you? Does it take you to see those individuals still there?
Now, someone said you must have extraordinary peripheral vision because I have always seen them by the side of the road, or somewhere in a yard, something going on. And if I see somebody stopping and looking into a ditch or something, I always think, I wonder if there's an animal there, and stop. I actually, though, I think it's the opposite of that, because the enormity is one thing, and it's so depressing to think how many animals are ground up just for a hamburger or pizza topping or whatever it is, or to test something when we have better ways to test. But it's heartbreaking actually to see a dog who has been, I've got one here in our headquarters, been shot in the face. And we've treated, it's her, we've treated her and she's recovering. I have another case down the corridor here from my office, a starvation case. And I walked her this morning and she's so glad of a meal. She's so glad of a walk. And it really shatters your heart in a million pieces. And so it's actually probably not as, I guess, buoying up to deal with these individual cases, because each one, you see the individual up close, you see the expression on their faces, or you see that they lost their life and it was just for some stupid reason, like the car going too fast. And so
Hmm.
that's very, very hard. And people say, oh, doesn't it get easier? It doesn't get any easier, it gets harder. Because you know so much more about them, you see so much more. I
Hmm.
see a face, a human face, if you will, in every other animal's face. I see their eyes, I know they have a heart, I see their nose, their mouths, their ears. It's just that they're a little bit different in the formation, but they're a person. There's a person there. And so you're dealing with somebody who is desperate for your help, and it can make you feel quite inadequate. You do what you can do, but the figures are gigantic, and so it all requires a lot of energy to just attack it.
Hmm. This is kind of a big question, but looking back over your career, something that you just said about being able to see that person inside of an animal, see their eyes, is something that now you and me, it's so intuitive, it's so obvious. How I'm sure it's been frustrating over the years that that doesn't get through to everybody, and it should. And you would think, like, just starting out, just letting people know some of the facts about this stuff cause them to change, but it ends up being a lot harder than that for some people, and I don't know why. But how have you dealt with that frustration over the years?
Well, I just think we're an inadequate species. You know, if you go to a lab that has chimpanzees, who are our closest living relatives, they're angry and they'll throw their feces at you. And if they can, they'll bite your finger or your face off because they're so. And I think those are our closest relatives. You
Mm-hmm.
know, they're quite aggressive, or they can be. And human beings are driven. I mean, if you listen to Freud or don't, we're driven by sex aggression. I mean, we are very greedy species. I think the wrong species rose to the top. Gorillas are very strong, but when they disagree with each other, they pound their chests and make a noise, and then they sit down and go away. Whereas I mean, a man was shot the other day outside a restaurant over an argument as to how many eggs a chicken lays. And you
Hmm.
think, what? I
Wow.
mean, people are so, they cut you off in traffic, they give you, nasty gesture, they shout, they're getting out of control on airplanes. What is this species about other than me, me, me? I want, let me have. I want, it's just, it's not good. And I think it's very hard for people to simply think, oh, I'm doing something that perhaps I shouldn't be. People get defensive. People don't like change. And so you just have to try your hardest to find some common ground to persuade them that eating animals, wearing them, seeing them in entertainment, experimenting on them is not the best thing for them, because it isn't. Animal liberation is human liberation. You get
Mm-hmm.
much more out of sophisticated alternatives, which are quicker to the use of poisoning beagles. You get a healthy diet out of not eating cheese and chicken and what have you. You dress as if you're not a cave person if you don't wear fur or leather or wool. And
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to be entertaining yourself with things that are throwback from pioneer days like rodeo, or from the time when we had elephants, majestic, wonderful beings, stand on their head so we could go, gosh, look what I was able to make him do. you
Mm-hmm.
know, it's appealing to them to have more self-worth about what they can do instead of just going along with what they were taught to do, and it's habitual to them, and it's unhealthy and not kind.
Yeah. I have watched several in the past few months, several YouTubers have made like PETA hit pieces. And I've been always curious to see what it is that they're so critical of. A few of them have brought up what something to me, it's so funny that two people can look at the same thing and see them so differently. To me, it's incredibly badass that PETA has supported ALF activists over the years, like Rod Coronado, supporting his legal work. And you wrote this book, Free the Animals, about how the ALF moved from, well, not moved, but came from the UK over to America. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that, and also your support of people like Rod Coronado, which I'll say again for the record, I think is incredible. I don't think that's something to be critical of at all. That's something that stands out to me about PETA, is that they've supported activists who put themselves on the line.
Well, the Animal Liberation Front was so active for so long, and I always would take my hat off to them because they would go into a laboratory and get animals out and look after them, provide them with the veterinary care they were denied. These poor, miserable animals, infected, sometimes they would have to get them straight to the vet and get them taken care of. Electrodes in their heads, have them taken out, all these things. And I thought, if someone had ever taken my wonderful dog, who at the time was named Miss B, if they had taken her, put her in a lab cage, she would be petrified. She would be so worried, and they would hurt her, and nobody would give her painkillers. If someone went in and got her out, I would kiss the ground they walked on. So
Mhm.
I cheered for the ALF whenever they took animals out. And I don't think buildings are sacred. I mean, if a child is in a hot car or a dog is in a hot car and you have to break the window to get them out, I mean, there you go. So I believe that they were ahead of their time. They were necessary, just as in civil rights times of earlier years of slavery, there were the freedom fighters. There have always been people who've been willing to go to jail for the rest of their lives, but to get somebody out who had no power, who couldn't look after themselves, who couldn't free themselves. So what they gave us in terms of documentation, videotapes, photographs, vet reports, nobody who cares about animals could read that stuff and say, oh, you should have left those animals in there. Uh, that was just indefensible. No, I mean, you may not be willing to do it. I may not be willing to do it, but they were willing to do it. And so when they got caught, if they did, we would put up money for their legal defense, because in America, everybody is innocent until proven guilty, and everybody deserves a defense. And some of them had what's called the greater good or lesser evil defense, is I had to do this because if I didn't, here is the harm, the horror, the killing that would have happened to this individual or these individuals. And I thought that gave them a chance, as with the University of Oregon, a case there with a teacher who took rabbits who had come from a lab. It gave the court and the press a chance to listen to the horrors that were going on behind closed doors. And even the judge in that case said, I'm ashamed to be an alumnus of that university, knowing what I know now.
Was it ever difficult doing this? Because I'm guessing that, some people criticize PETA over this, and some maybe big organizations at the time didn't support ALF activities because they were worried about donors, losing donors. And I'm sure PETA's lost their share of donors over the years, but was this a struggle for you guys to do this? Did you have to stick your necks out there, or was it for you just kind of like a no-brainer all the time?
It was a no-brainer, because I thought that what was right and what was just, and sometimes bad laws have to be broken, as they say. But yes, it was a hard road to hoe for a long time, and for a lot of reasons. We were investigated by the FBI, and at one point, all the people who were coming and going from our office wore monkey masks so that nobody knew who was who. The FBI used to park outside our door and watch people coming and going. I would go up in winter and ask them if they wanted any hot chocolate. But yeah, I had to give my fingerprints. All our staff had to give their photographs. And we had some fun with it, because they should have been going after the vivisectors at the University of Pennsylvania who had brain damaged these poor baboons in some device that they had created, and then mocked them. We had the videotapes of them holding up these disabled monkeys who didn't know where they were and were in pain, and saying, hope the anti-vivisection people don't get hold of this, and making them wave on camera even though they were brain damaged. Just sick things, smoking while they were conducting surgery, smashing their heads in a device. And so the FBI should have been after them. The prosecutor should have locked them up. And later, many years later, I actually spoke to a Pennsylvania prosecutor who said, we really were after the wrong people.
Oh, wow. A little bit of self-awareness and reflection is needed. Is it true that it was once inquired to PETA whether or not the windows would be able to stop bullets? I read that.
Well, it is true. I mean, how foolish do you think we are that after 9/11, there were laws passed against anything that anybody could really make of anybody they didn't like. It wasn't just terrorists. And so people in the animal exploitation business were trying to use those to say, oh, these people are disruptive of the American economy. No, all we're saying is, hey, you got a choice. Instead of choosing A, choose B. There's an economy in both. There's employment in both. But yes, we had law enforcement come to our door, and they wanted to know the thickness of glass on our windows, which they said, in case there's a terrorist attack and someone invades your office and we have to shoot them through the window. I thought,
wow.
no, not going there. They wanted our alarm system and how we disarm it. No, I mean, you don't need to look at us at all. I mean, we're people who are teaching nonviolence, who are teaching kindness, who are giving you options, and who don't like a violent system like slaughterhouses. So go away.
Yeah. Wow. What an incredible history. Now you and you served as spokesperson at one point for the ALF. Is that true?
That is true. Yes, I was proud to do so because I wanted the evidence that they had taken out of places like labs, and it was mostly labs, to be given to the public. I believe they should be in the public domain, that there shouldn't be secrecy involved, and that people shouldn't be able to do to animals behind closed doors in a lab what you would be arrested for doing just like that if you were doing it on the street. So I wanted the world to know what was happening. And so I said, yes, I would definitely show the public. So we had news conferences and we would show the photographs, show the documents, and show the films and say to people, now you choose. And a lot has changed since then, but a lot remains the same. With, you mentioned CDC, luckily, isn't going to fund any more monkey experiments. The monkey experiments that go on in this country to this day are so atrocious that only the most cold-hearted person, the Attila the Hun kind of character, would approve of them. And they get us nowhere. And these monkeys are going out of their mind, banging their heads on the metal cages and twirling in circles, and just lost their marbles because they're being tortured.
Yeah. Well, and PETA can take some credit for that. And you guys have, done so many monumental things over the years. Just to sort of wrap up the talk about the ALF, I really encourage people to read Free the Animals. It's such an incredible history. And it wasn't until a couple of years ago, I've been in the movement about 7 or 8 years at this point. It wasn't until a few years ago that I started to learn all this history and got really interested in it. And it's such a fascinating history. And PETA has been such a part of that. Where was I going? But yeah, like when you look back at your career, I'm sure there's so much to be proud of. What are some of those things that you can look back on and say, yeah, PETA, we did this thing. We accomplished that.
Well, I think one of the things that I'm most fond of is we stopped all car crash tests on animals worldwide. So that's why you see the mannequins, the car crash dummies, is because we stopped it. They were smashing baboons and pigs into walls. We stopped the military from sending monkeys into space, from shooting dogs and pigs in wound labs. We showed them that they could go. We had lots of doctors say, come to our emergency room in a big city. We'll show you real gunshot wounds that you can have your medics practice on and watch by the side of a skilled surgeon. And we showed them all sorts of things like that. I think the fur wars, when we first started, believe it or not, in 1980, every little girl wanted to grow up to have a fur coat. And nobody knew about steel traps that animals are stuck in, trying to chew off their own limbs. And so we did all that, and we had protests after protests. God bless everybody who came out and stood in front of stores and did all that stuff. And so now, of course, we've moved on to wool and leather and Angora and cashmere and said, don't need any of it. It belongs to the ones who are born in it. That's it. We got the first prosecution of an experimenter for cruelty to animals and the first removal of animals from a lab under a search warrant. We worked with law enforcement. We've had many convictions of factory farmers for cruelty over the years. We've closed laboratories, like one in the Carolinas. We got out almost 300, I think, dogs and cats who are being tested in atrocious ways for things that you have a simple in vitro test, a test tube test that you could use instead. There are just so many wonderful things but we've got so much more to do that I urge everybody, please do something. Come, we'll find something for you to do if you look at the website.
I've heard so many criticisms of PETA that I have found to be just kind of ridiculous. One of them, though, that I think is that is valid, and I'm going to ask you about, is this idea that fur is dead. I've been hearing that repeated several times, fur is dead. And we know that fur is not, that there is still a fur industry. So is there danger? And I've heard this criticism from members of, the grassroots animal rights movement. So what would you say to them that's dangerous? That, and I'm sort of reminded, I kind of think about this in terms of like a horror movie where you've got like Michael Myers down. He's like laying on the ground and you've got to, she's got the gun right there. She could take him out, but of course, she runs away and then comes back later. Oh, Michael Myers is gone. Is that the fur industry? Because I'm worried that we've prematurely declared the fur industry dead.
I'm not worried because for years, the fur industry has every winter or in the new year says, we're back. Everybody wants fur, and they don't. You don't see it on the catwalk. You don't see it in retailers almost anywhere. I was just in New York City, and I can go back 15 years, and you couldn't take 3 steps without seeing someone in a fur. I saw one old lady, bless her heart, wearing her fur. She will never buy another one. And everybody looked at her and thought, there's an old lady wearing a fur coat. I mean, that's where it is. Periodically, they try to bring it back. And periodically, you have somebody saying, oh, well, we're going to do something new with fur. But it's decimated, absolutely decimated. And it's not just fur. The Angora industry is decimated. We had a major retailer, the name of Zara, who we showed them our footage of an undercover investigation that we had conducted with veterinarians in China. And the rabbits are tied down and they're live plucked, if you will. Their hair is torn out. It would, same for you. If you tore out your hair, you'd be screaming. And that goes into Angora. And they were trying to sell it in various ways, jackets and this, that, and the other. And we showed them. And they were an ethical company. And they took Angora off their shelves. And we made all those into little children's coats and sent them to the refugees in Afghanistan for the winter. So we have had so many thousands of coats given to us over the years. It's tax deduction, but nobody wants to be seen dead in them. So I'm not worried at all. I think we'll always, it'll be 4 steps forward and maybe a quarter of a step back, and then 4 steps forward again.
So how does that, I know this is kind of a tough question to answer, but how does, because it may vary case by case, but what is the decision making like in declaring a victory? Like when maybe say like, you're like 95% there, like, because we know that fur, there is still a fur industry. Animals are still being killed for fur. It certainly doesn't have the popularity that it has now, but I've got friends who say, we've got fur on the ropes. We need to finish them off. Like now's the time to really hit the fur industry.
I agree, but there are many other clothing industries that are equally cruel that need to be bumped off. Absolutely, anything anybody could do to make it something nobody ever wishes to wear. But you look at the seal industry, for example, just that was something everybody started to know about. And then country by country, we got export bans. They can't send it anywhere. And then you look at Hudson Bay was the biggest farrier in Canada and known the earliest, gone out of business. Everywhere you see out of business, out of business, out of business. I remember the first place that in Washington that we protested, out of business, and it was a very big fur company. Stars used to appear in ads, and it would be what becomes a legend most, and they'd be wearing a fur. I think you'd be hard pressed to find anybody do that today. We had the I'd rather go naked than wear fur thing, and it really, there was no reason to have it anymore. After 30 years of campaigning, we called it a day. So, but it really is something that if you ever see anybody in a fur coat, unless they're like this poor little old lady who, she didn't know, and she's not going to set a fashion trend, I think it's important to say something to them. Very courteously is fine. It's just, I know you think you look good in that fur, but honestly, a lot of people are thinking what I'm going to say to you. is that it's a sign that you either don't know or don't care, that the animals suffered so awfully and were killed so badly, and many of them, to make that jacket or coat. Everybody needs to say something. What's the
Mhm.
worst that can happen? I always say somebody can say, go to hell. Do you care what they say to you? Um,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, and listening to that talk you gave with Faraz, you mentioned like cases where you will go about your day to day and try to mention to people in your life that that you're just encountering day to day. Say a little thing. I want to make sure because we have about 10 minutes left. I want to make sure that you're able to like sort of give a message to my core audience, which I believe is animal rights activists. Hopefully it extends beyond that, but mostly it's pretty motivated animal rights activists. What would be a message that you could give to them to sort of motivate them? Because they're already pretty motivated, I think, but maybe they need that extra push.
oh, I think everybody who does anything is a fantastic asset to our movement. I used to think, oh, why can't people do more? Why can't people do more? People are busy. They have all sorts of things in their lives, things you don't even know about. And if they do one thing, I am so grateful. Just don't fight with each other, please. Concentrate on what you're doing. Make your life count. Who cares about anybody else? And people have different priorities. But with animals, it's so awful because they're suffering in so many different pursuits, so many different ways. So if someone says, well, I believe we should all be working together on this one thing, it's not what humans do. But be
Mhm.
glad that 20 people may be working on 20 different cruelties. And when we can come together and work collectively on one, that's fantastic. But if you're called, if you're moved, if something appeals to you, you are more upset by one cruelty or another, then that is what you're going to do, and you're going to make some difference. But please arm yourself. Never go anywhere to the store without vegan starter kits. I always put them in food magazines because I
Mhm.
think it's a bonus. Someone buys a food magazine, a cooking magazine, they get home, they open it, they've got a VSK in there. How great is that? Put them on
Mhm.
the racks in the grocery stores. Say something. You've got a voice. You've got sometimes a captive audience, in the elevator at the grocery store. Just be cheerful and say something to people like, have you tried this? Or those are lovely. Are those vegan? Whatever you want to do. And make food for people who never would eat it themselves. They think it tastes awful. So make them
Mhm.
something or buy them something. Like Just has just come out with Just Chicken, and apparently it is
Ooh,
phenomenal.
I didn't know that.
So yeah. So, and the Just Egg is phenomenal too. I mean,
Yeah,
it
it
couldn't
is.
be easier. So you just give people this and they'll be surprised. Not
Mhm.
feed each other, but feed somebody who isn't vegan, isn't vegetarian. Make things for potlucks. Get involved socially on any food committee. And just please drain us dry of any resources you need. They're yours for the taking, but please, let's do everything we can in whatever way we wish to do it.
Yeah, and I'll say, anytime I've reached out to PETA, like, as I mentioned before, sometimes it was for like materials for like, like maybe there's a Pride festival coming up. We would get some materials that are Pride themed or something. PETA will always send that to you. And I don't think everybody knows that you can actually reach out to PETA and get free materials, free signs. I've even heard people, I've never asked for this, but I've heard people say that, maybe you don't want the PETA brand on your thing. We can send you ones without PETA's logo and that sort of thing. So it's been really helpful.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that.
If you would do your own name as a local group, the thing is to stop animals from suffering and to stop animals being treated as things. And so I don't care. You can put the PETA name on it, not put the PETA name on it. When somebody says something horrible about PETA, you don't have to defend us. You can say, oh, yeah, them. But the point that I want to make, and then make your own point.
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
our local group is doing whatever. I mean, we don't need you to defend us. We need everyone to defend animals.
Yeah, sometimes, and I don't do this because I think PETA is awesome, but I do think that sometimes it's helpful to have like the good guy, bad guy. It's like, well, okay, well, you don't like PETA. Well, you don't want to deal with PETA, right? So talk to me. And
Perfect.
yeah, there you go. I like that you said also in that talk with Faraz, leave a trail of animal rights stuff. Like you know, I like to think of like I want people to know I've been someplace. So like I may go, but my animal rights message can stay. I think that's a good way to look at it. I also like this quote that I've read from you somewhere. If you always succeed, you're not trying hard enough. I like that a lot because it just speaks to, you've got to speak up. I'll quote Wayne as saying, speak up even when your voice shakes. You've talked about, feeling nervous about speaking. I'm sure you felt that over the years too. Like maybe at the beginning, I'm sure you're pretty thick skinned at this point. But
Oh,
yeah,
I
how do
don't
you,
know.
well, sometimes I like to talk about fear because I feel like fear is something that holds us back a lot as activists, as species that we're dictated by fear. How have you overcome fear over the years? It doesn't seem like it's affected you very much. At least if it has, you've overcome it.
Well, I don't think anyone can ever feel as afraid as I have a picture of a man in China teaching a monkey to ride a bike, and the monkey has just fallen off the bicycle, and the monkey is cowering. It's almost visceral, and the man has a rod with a whip on the end and is going for him. And the look on this monkey's face and the body position of this monkey, that's fear. I've been afraid a lot of times in my life. My father was an adventurer and he would take me with him as a little girl and we would climb an ice mountain. And I thought, oh God, Daddy, we're going to die. So I know fear, but it's still nothing like the fear that the animals go through. So if you're feeling nervous, that's normal. If you're feeling afraid to say something, it's normal. But push yourself. And that's what I've had to do. Is the first time I took over a runway. It was in New York City, a fur runway, and my knees were knocking. My teeth have chattered on occasion, but I think, who am I if I don't speak up right now? Who am I if I don't say something? This is my opportunity. Otherwise they'll leave there thinking, that was good, that's great, I'm going to get this, I'm going to do that. And so say something. You've got a voice, use it. Don't go to your grave thinking, I should have said something then, or I should have done something then, or I should have informed them. And each of us, Jeremy, I believe this with all my heart, is each of us is grateful to somebody who informed us, even if we were defensive at the time, even if we said, why, I don't know about that. It sits back in our consciousness. And if you hear something enough, I'm so grateful to people who first showed me pig farming. I will never forget that woman as long as I live. Thank you so much. I had no idea. So even though I said, oh, really? It
Mhm.
helped me become a vegetarian and then a vegan.
Yeah. Well, and also it just kind of speaks to our power. So in those moments when, your teeth were chattering or your knees were knocking before you ran up there, I'm sure once you got up and did it, kind of melted away and you were in the moment. And from there on, it was about the animals. But did you think back to that monkey? Did you think back to the animal that is afraid? Is that kind of what powered you through those moments?
Yeah, I always say to people, if you're about to do something that frightens you, but you know you should, then keep the vision of one animal you love or you have been moved by in front of you and do it for her, do it for him. Go on, do it because they can't do it for themselves. When you see animals as clothing, they can't come back, you can't bring them back, but they died so badly. And if you don't stop that person in their tracks and make them think, other animals as wonderful are going to die badly. So, yeah, keep the one vision in your mind, perhaps, if that's helpful to you, and just go for them, help them,
Mhm.
do it for them.
You've mentioned wool, and just before we leave, are there any things that are pressing like right now? I know we're coming up on Thanksgiving, so maybe people think about turkeys a little bit. Um, but are there any like pressing campaigns that people can jump on right now to really help out PETA's work and help out the animals?
Oh, there are so many, but I mean, choose what you like. But we want to close the monkey labs, all the monkey labs. It's not that monkeys are more important than rats and mice and guinea pigs and what have you, but there is an opportunity now to close the monkey labs because we have shown monkeys who are full of disease coming in from Cambodia and Vietnam into this country. Everybody has heard about the vans overturning and the monkeys scattering on the highway and then being shot to death. Um, all these things are going on. And then you look inside the labs and you see what they do to them. And they're a star species. People feel, experimenters feel really important if they're experimenting on a monkey. So now is the time to tell NIH, close the monkey labs, close them all. University of Oregon should be the first to go. Over 5,000 monkeys stuck in that hellhole. But yes, it's thanks vegan now. And if you can get a tofurkey and feed somebody, that's grand. If you can write a letter to the editor about that kind of thing, that's fantastic. But there are, unfortunately, a lot of different things that people can do, and they're mostly on our website. That sign up, please, or just do it yourself and join in. Join in. We need you. Animals
Yeah,
need you.
please do. Ingrid, I'm going to let you go, but I just want to extend a huge thank you for setting the bar high for us. It's up to us as activists now to reach that bar and surpass it. But your hardworkingness, your compassion, your dedication to the animals has been such a lift for me, and I'm sure for many other people. And I hope that we will continue on. I know your work is not done. I don't mean to speak as it in past tense, but I hope we continue on that legacy. And thank you. Thank you for your time
Oh,
as
thank
well.
you. Thanks, Jeremy. Thanks for putting this on the air. And all the best to you and all the best to activists.
All right. Take care, Ingrid. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.